Welcome to our latest session at LocalGov Drupal Week. Thanks very much for joining us. This session is entitled Upgrading. No, we're not doing that, are we?
Making
We're
it
definitely upgrading LocalGov Drupal, Drupal 10 and beyond. It's hosted by Finn, our tech lead, and Andy from Brighton and Hove City Council, who's done lots of work on the project. Thanks to both of them for running the session. We'd like to take this opportunity to also thank our event sponsor, Home Connections. For those who don't know, they're a company owned and led by local authorities and housing associations. Home Connections is a social purpose company supporting a fairer housing sector. We'd also like to thank all our councils and supplier subscribers and our supporting partner Netcall, who've contributed so much to the project this week and more widely. The next bit was Zoom help. So for those who weren't in at the beginning, if you click view at the top right, you'll be able to change how you see the screen. So Finn's going to be sharing his screen in a minute, so that might be quite useful. I'll now hand you over to Finn, who'll be running the session. Thank you, Finn.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much. And welcome. Before I start sharing my screen, I'm just going to run a little poll because you can. I was interested in actually who's here, as in people more technical, or people more just interested in the upgrade process in general. But I can't figure out how to run the poll now. I said, oh, it's because it's over here. Let's just try it. So there'll be a little poll hopefully up on the screen saying what's your role with respect to LGD. Are you technical and actually going to get involved in upgrades, or are you less technical but just interested? Only two options, but I'm just interested to see who's here. Let me see if I can share my screen while we're getting that up. Come on, Zoom, you can do it. Great. Can you see my screen, Tim?
Certainly can.
What if we're technical but don't get involved in upgrades?
You have to make a call, but you can feel free to comment in the chat, and yeah, just interested in the lay of the land really, but feel free to make comments as we go in the chat and ask questions, and we'll try and get to them towards the end. Yeah, binary questions are never that safe, are they? Sorry. So yeah, LocalGov Drupal, Drupal 10 and beyond, upgrading Drupal. I'm Finn from Open Code and Tech Lead at LocalGov Drupal, and I'll be joined by Andy Broomfield from Brighton and Hove City Council, who has been at the front line of upgrading Drupal 10 recently and has some things to share with us. So I am going to just dive on through. Going to cover why update, just in case people are unsure of that. I'm going to do a live demo of upgrading to Drupal 10 week. And talk to Andy about learnings from the front line, and then just summarize takeaways and key points that you might want to take off with you, and hopefully get to questions and answers, and see what we can get to there, because keen to hear what questions people have. So why update? Why update at all? We've got, it works. Why, it ain't broke, don't fix it. I probably preaching to the converted here, but updating Drupal is important for lots of reasons. Key reasons include security, making sure that any security updates are applied. Performance is another one, where you hope that latest and greatest technologies, improvements in PHP and code efficiency make our sites and experiences run quicker. And of course, new features. As we continue to update the software, new features tend to be in the updates and not in the older versions. Accessibility is another reason that springs to mind. I guess that comes under features, but arguably could be its own point. There's lots of other reasons too, but in general, it's good to keep on updating our software. With this in mind, Drupal 9 was end of life, which is probably no surprise to people here, but it was end of life on the 1st of November. That means it's no longer covered by security updates, so it's definitely time to update to Drupal 10 if you have not already. And it's worth just looking a little bit back to when Drupal 9 was released in 2020, and thinking about our own LocalGov Drupal releases on top of the Drupal core versions. So a couple of dates here. We released LocalGov Drupal 2.0 in May 2021, just shy of a year after Drupal 9 was released. And since then, we've done 35 releases of minor and patch releases up until the 3.00 release this month, after Drupal 10 was released in last year, December. So again, following it by about a year. Here's just an overview of the Drupal release cycle, just to remind people who know and bring it to the attention of people who don't. But these days, Drupal is aiming to release every 2 years or so, following the underlying Symfony long-term support PHP framework that underpins a lot of Drupal core code. Drupal 10 was actually released a little bit later than expected, late 22 rather than mid 22. And so for this reason, we've had a little bit less time between Drupal 10 being released and Drupal 9 going end of life than we would have liked, I guess, as a community. But looking ahead, there's a little bit more of a crossover between the releases. Another thing to note is that we're looking to a potential, not confirmed, but sort of LTS phase of Drupal core, where the main support will be focused on the new version, but there will still be security updates for a longer period of time for the previous version. So again, 2-year-ish release cycle, but possibly up to 4 years of security coverage for that. And I'll share these slides, but there's a link to the comment on the Drupal.org issue at the top of that. In fact, Tim, if you could grab, actually you might not be able to find it. You should be able to find it. If someone can find the slide deck and just share a link, then people should be able to have that as well in their browsers. So upgrading to Drupal 10, what's the process? Again, if you've already done this, you probably know, but there's a 2-step process really: preparing to update your Drupal 9 site and looking at, in fact, we'll just end the polls. People can see, it looks like most people are actually technical and get involved in the upgrade, so probably are aware of this. But to anyone else, it's about preparing, getting Drupal 9 ready for the update to Drupal 10, and the same will be true of Drupal 10 to 11. And then the second step is actually updating the code and making that. So there's potentially 2 steps to deploying the update. Preparing involves checking your PHP versions, updating core to the latest version, making sure contrib modules are all up to date for any updates that they might provide, updating your custom code and themes, and addressing any deprecated projects that have been removed from Drupal core. The upgrade status project is invaluable with this. We'll have a look at that in a minute. It helps to analyze your code base and your config and check that all things are ready for Drupal 10. So this module, is contributed project, does make it a lot easier to prepare yourself for Drupal 10. So let's have a look, shall we? Let's have a little run through. So I've got locally a copy of our LocalGov Drupal.org site, which is our public facing site for LocalGov Drupal, speaking to the world about what we do and how we collaborate, and is built on LocalGov Drupal, so it makes it a useful test site to run the update on. A couple of things to note before we dive into making any changes is that this is a version running on Drupal 9.5. The live site has actually been updated to Drupal 10, so I'm just replicating the process that was done. And something else to note, because geolocation entities are of particular interest, this site does have some geolocation entities in the form of a suppliers directory channel. And we'll be having a look at those as we upgrade as well, because there are some changes to the LocalGov Geo and the underlying geolocation entities that we will see. Right, so I've done a little bit of preparation insofar as I've got a bunch of branches on my local DDev site that go through the preparation steps and then do the update. Again, apologies if this is your bread and butter. Tim, could you keep an eye on people in the waiting room, because there are people trying to get in. Just clicking admit there. We are, oh, somebody's requesting recording. Somebody else could look at that. That would be cool. We are recording this, I think, anyway. So we are at the beginning of a Drupal 9 upgrade site. The first thing we're going to do is install upgrade status module and have a look at what that gives us. So I'm just going to check out my branch rather than running composer commands, because Actually, that's not true. I am actually going to run composer install, which brings down the upgrade status module and its dependencies. And I'm going to run drush-cim to import the config. And we can see that's just set up the upgrade status module. What this gives us is a nice report that we saw as it was screenshot a minute ago, which tells us that our site is 81% ready for Drupal 10, which is pretty cool. It gives us a bunch of things that we need to check. It's basically a checklist of core and config things to prepare for Drupal 10. I'm just going to go super quickly through this, and then we can come to any questions at the end. So Drupal core is up to date with the latest. PHP version is 8.1, which is fine. Database is supported, but we have some invalid permissions. Now, if you have invalid permissions in Drupal 10, that will be a problem. So on the next branch, I have removed those invalid permissions, and they were a legacy of layout paragraphs, I think. There were a few permissions that came from an earlier version of layout paragraphs, and somehow they were left in the site. So hopefully that will have removed those permissions, and upgrade status will be happy, which is good. Next up, deprecated or obsolete core extensions. There's lots of things that have been removed from Drupal core, including CK Editor 4, Quick Edit, and Classy and Stable Theme. Again, I'm just going to check out the next branch and import the config to get us up to date there. You see it's uninstalled LocalGov theme and LocalGov skeleton. They were both older themes and now deprecated within LocalGov Drupal that did depend on Classy and Stable. So that suggests this site was installed quite a long time ago originally, which we know it was. We've also got rid of Quick Edit and CK Editor. So that should be making us a little bit more happy on the deprecated or obsolete modules. Yes, indeed, we've got all of our core and hosting checks up to date. Next step is a suggestion to remove modules that are not installed. Now, we're going to ignore this, but just a quick note, like most of these are LocalGov Drupal modules, which we included our code base, but are optional, so we don't have them installed. Some of them are other things like we got stage file proxy, which you might want in your code base, but only enable sometimes locally. So again, we can ignore things that are not actually installed, but it's good to check in case you've just got code that you don't want and you can remove it. Next up are modules that are not compatible locally, but do have a version on Drupal.org that is compatible. Block class, geocoder, and web form in our case. Now, block class and bit branch. Block class and web form are going to be fine because they have releases that support Drupal 9 and Drupal 10, but geocoder is not, and I'll explain why in a second. So I've learned how to type. In this case, I'm going to run composer install because the checkout has just changed the composer file, which updates those versions of those modules. I'm going to do the drush up db to bring in the database updates that those updated modules want to make. And if we just go back to the upgrade status, we can see that we're just left with geocoder. Now, geocoder is an interesting case in point because it is a module that does purport to have a branch that supports 9 and 10, but in practice, it won't install because Drupal 9 core recommended has some dependency on an older Gazelle version, and it doesn't like it. The dependencies don't meet. So we can't actually install Drupal the 4.x branch on Drupal 9. There is a suggestion here on the project page to extend your requirements to 3 or 4. In our case, that doesn't quite work because our dependency is further down in LocalGov Geo, which I will come to in a bit. Suffice to say, we know that when we do upgrade, the dependency on geocoder is the more recent version, and so a little bit of investigation will lead you to the fact that that is fine to ignore as well. I'll come back to LocalGov Geo in a bit because there are some interesting points around the update. Next up is scanning custom code, which has got LGD org blocks and a theme, which it says is incompatible, which is true. If we have a look at the blocks.info file, it's only declaring a core version requirement of 8 or 9. So on the face of it, it doesn't support, I cannot spell checkout today. It doesn't support Drupal 10. If I check out the branch where I've made these updates, it now does support Drupal 10. And actually with these modules, that is all that we needed to do because the code was already compatible. Worth mentioning here, Drupal Rector, which I won't go into now, but is a very useful tool which scans your code and API calls and method calls and function calls and all the rest of it, and will make automatic updates from Drupal 9 to Drupal 10 code where it can, which is pretty cool. In this case, it wasn't needed because it was just a version missing. In fact, I think Rector would probably make those updates as well to the version requirements. In fact, it'd be interesting to hear from anyone who's got more experience with Rector in the questions. Next up, collaborate with maintainers. Again, these are modules that upgrade status doesn't know if there's a version or not, because we don't actually host these on Drupal.org. So it can't get any information on whether there's a Drupal 10 release available or not. We know that there is because we're about to upgrade to LocalGov Drupal 3.0.0, which is fully compatible with Drupal 10. So we can ignore that. If there were other modules that you found here, it would hopefully have links back to Drupal.org. You'd be able to discuss with the maintainers about what's going on and collaborate, get it updated. Rattling through this, we now have a list of all the other things which are compatible, and we've got our nice local 10 ready column, compatible, which is great. That is what we want to see. So we're basically at the stage where we can run our update. So I'm going to check out this branch. Actually, I'm going to also just have a quick look at our documentation, which I forgot to mention at the beginning again. So it's worth mentioning there is lots of great documentation on Drupal.org and in our LocalGov wiki pages. So if you go to LocalGov Drupal/LocalGov, there's a page called Upgrading for Drupal 9 to 10. And it talks about upgrade status, it talks about preparing your Drupal 9 site. It talks about enabling LocalGov Geo update if you haven't already. If you're at the latest version of LocalGov Geo, that will have been enabled. It also mentions removing config inspector should you want to do it. And then it comes down to the point where we're actually upgrading our code. It has a bunch of no update commands, which update your composer file to the latest Drupal 10 and then run the composer update. So I think actually I might have just done that with my checkout. Let's have a look at the composer version. I have just done that. So I've updated the composer file. So I'm just going to run ddev composer update. And it will run through its composer shenanigans, check out all the dependencies. And as long as there's nothing that is a logical conundrum for it, it will update all the code. Back on our how-to here, this is so far pretty standard as Drupal 9 to 10 update. This next bit is a little specific to LocalGov Drupal. The geo field map module is something that we did depend on in LocalGov Geo. But we no longer do in our latest version. However, if we still have configuration from geofield map from previous, then we may well need to install geofield map so that the update doesn't complain, basically. The recommendation is to move away from geofield map to a leaflet, but each to their own. Some people want to keep it. So as a sort of fallback, we just install geofield map in case there is any configuration there. So now let's just run our ddev-updb, and this should run all of the database updates from Drupal core and contrib modules, including our LocalGov Geo updates. And that is something that I specifically want to draw attention to. The fact that we have moved from LocalGov Geo entities to the Geo entity on Drupal.org, which is here. So this came out of LocalGov Drupal work, but was useful enough to other people that we wanted to make a contributed module. And so now the geo entity is non-LocalGov Drupal specific, but we are dependent on it. And that involved an update that migrates our location geo entities from LocalGov Geo to geo entity, which is done as part of these updates. So we can see those updates have run from the geo update, which has not only updated the content, the entity content, but has also updated configuration. And let's just clear the cache for safety and go log into our site, and hopefully we have a Drupal 10 site running relatively happily. It's always a bit slow when you're on Zoom. And status report should tell us that we're on Drupal 10.1.6. Lovely. Just want to draw attention to the fact that our locations are all here, and they are no longer LocalGov_geo entities, they are geo entities, which was done by that update. And if we have a quick look at our directory channel, we should be able to see them on the map, confirming that those have been updated. Now, that's all well and good, but I should draw attention to the fact that this is on the local. We now would export our config and deploy that up to dev and to test and to live production. And there is release notes on LocalGov Geo on the 2.0.0 release, just going through these steps and outlining towards the end that once you are deploying, you will need to run an extra deploy hook or just drush deploy, which may well be part of your standard deployment process anyway. And the reason for this is, I will demonstrate. Will I? Yes, I will. Is that we've already exported the config that has been updated, and so that config is now in code. And so if we try and run the updates again, we don't want to regenerate that config because we would end up with a conflict. Let me just get rid of everything. I'm just going to import a database, which is basically going to be from just before the point at which I ran updb. So imagine you've got your Drupal 9 site on production, you're about to deploy all of your config and your code updates, and you want to run the deployment, which is usually drush, import your config, run your drush database updates, import your config, and run drush deploy. Import db. LocalGov something, local 3d10.2, I think it was. What have I done wrong there? I haven't got my little arrow. And this is something that is a bit of a LocalGov Drupal specific issue, but is worth being aware of. What am I doing now? Dev drush updb. So this is, again, imagining we've just deployed our code. It's still the Drupal 9 database. It doesn't know it's Drupal 10 yet, and so it's running the updates. But this time, we're going to have a look closely at the LocalGov Geo updates, and we notice that it's skipped its updates. Detected you have already run these updates and you've exported the configuration, so we're not doing it again. What we do now need to do, in fact, before we do that, let's have a quick look at our geolocation entities. In fact, I just need to log in again, aren't I? Yeah. At the moment, I'm expecting that we won't have any geolocation entities. We have just updated, but in fact, I can't even see the locations there. Because we've skipped those updates, because we've already got the config, there's no actual locations related to the suppliers. So if we now do our drush deploy hook, deploy, drush deploy I think covers database update, drush CIM, and then drush deploy hook, the actual hook that implements the deploy. So you can see there it's run through the config import, and it's run the drush deploy hook, which is the LocalGov geo update, and that is where it's updated 14 of 14 geo entities. So hopefully now if we go back to the site, we see our geolocation entities there. Great, I'm glad that worked. But yeah, that is one of the key things to watch out for if you have a LocalGov Drupal D9 site using geolocations. So anything that relies on directory venues will be using geolocations. And there is that extra step at deployment. Cool, so we have a Drupal 10 upgrade, and that took what, 15-20 minutes? Obviously a little bit of preparation, but the point is it is multi-step. You do need to go through the steps in the right order. You do need checks and balances. You know, just it's a checklist basically. And then obviously you need to test to make sure that your site is happy. So let's go back to the slides. That was the demo. Boom, boom, boom. What's next? Testing is not optional. No, it's not. I mean, you could try and deploy it without testing, but it's not recommended. Just briefly before we go and talk to Andy about the experience at Brighton, testing updates is really, really important. Automated testing is your friend here. We've got lots of automated testing already on LocalGov Drupal and on Drupal.org. And if you can extend it and have extended it on your own, that's great. Then you've got your own automated test that will help confirm your site's working. But human testing is never, you know, never far behind. You're always going to need to have a look through the site and test it. So do build that into your deployment process. The automated testing on GitHub is great and is a great place to start. If you're able to use GitHub for your projects, then you can build on the test environment and the automated testing scripts that we've got there. I know that's what Andy and VHCC do. Speaking of Andy and VHCC, maybe we can come to you, Andy, now and have a little chat about.
Hopefully you can see me.
Going.
It's sort of. Hiya.
Let me
hear
try.
me?
I can hear you. Yes, I can.
Yeah, I'm also hoping people can see me a bit because the room I'm in is quite dark and the lights aren't really illuminating properly. Yeah, so well. I can go through with some of the experiences we did at BHCC. We upgraded to Drupal 10 during the alpha phase, so not during the alpha of the LocalGov 3 releases. So this is just kind of our release notes and our notes on that process, just highlighting it was released in December 2022. We had until 1st November. We obviously wanted to be on there before that date. And so it broadly breaks down to 4 categories. We've got custom modules and themes. So if you've done any custom modules, you'll need to make those compatible with Drupal 10. Drupal Rector is a good tool for this. Rosie and Hannah, who I think might be on the call, did a lot of work of going through Drupal Rector. Sometimes it's an automated process. A lot of the time it will spit out some output of what you need to do. So this is just a list of modules that needed fixes. And between the two of them, they went through and did a really great job of going through and just getting our code into Drupal 10 compatibility. So thanks a lot for the help on that one. And you get a nice little party emoji. Other things we came across, contributed modules. Again, mostly with what Finn said, there's a few things that we ran into. The biggest is the web form project. When they were very late in getting a full release. In fact, you can see that they did the full release for Drupal 10 on October 30th. And we were obviously needed to test before that. At the time we started, they were still in beta. So we did a test branch with betas. And again, our test engineers actually went through and started testing the web forms in 6.2. So this is just a spreadsheet of some of the test data, taking a thorough look at our sample forms and just going through and making sure they're behaving as we expect. We also updated by the time we actually did update to web form, it was on the 6.1 release, or not that the release candidate ones, they just finished their beta. We deployed web form a couple of weeks before we deployed Drupal 10 updates, just so that if there were issues with forms, we could trace them to being web form issues rather than issues with the Drupal 10 update. The next complicated module was a module called Views Access Per Node. This one is one where it doesn't actually have a Drupal 10 release. However, there is a patch to make it compatible. So what we use is we use a plugin called Composer Drupal Lenient, and this plugin allows you to install Drupal 9 modules in a Drupal 10 website, and then we can go down below and we can apply the patch that makes it compatible with Drupal 10. And the third one on our list of complicated modules was this one called PDF using MPDF. And there was a lot of debate in the issue queue about whether that was actually going to get a Drupal 10 release, because it was depending on an older version of the library that wasn't supporting something else. And so we took a decision to actually replace that module with another module called PDF API. But it did mean that we had to invest in about a week and a half's worth of work to rewrite a feature that we built to support that new module, so to be able to use the new PDF API module rather than the existing one. But that just means we're on a much more stable release for the underlying library, and that feature can keep being supported. And then there's obviously the LocalGov Drupal. I think Finn's covered that one. We went through and did a lot of help with the LocalGov Geo. So as we were involved in the project, we kind of knew the geo entity switch was going to be an issue. And there was quite late, we did discover some issues with actually upgrading, because we have some custom geo entities for our parking zone data. So obviously we needed to help with the upgrade process on that one. But from that, everything else came in fairly smoothly. And finally, we have kind of like updating Drupal core itself. So we placed that on a testing environment. We got our test engineers to, again, help us with testing. So we have a mix of automated and a lot of manual testing as well that our test engineers went through. So they just went through different sections of the site, compared them to from our acceptance environment and our production environment, of where things are, make sure they're either the same, or if something is different, that we actually know that there is something coming in different. So it is something we know is a Drupal 10 issue. And we can go through the process and actually just go through fixing those issues. So that was kind of very helpful as well. Just thinking through, we then got a GitHub PR raised on our own one that passed its testing, and then we agreed a deployment. So in terms of automating testing, we because we're on GitHub, we use the same testing infrastructure that LocalGov Drupal use, just adjusted so it points to our own file. So this testing the upgrade Drupal pull request to LocalGov Drupal 3 can run through our automated tests. We've started putting some of it is retrofitting and some of it is new tests that we've started putting in to our custom modules. So they've got test coverage, and we're also progressively scanning them for PHP CS and PHP stand. So we're trying to make those forward compatible for Drupal 11. We also run Selenium tests. These are every time we make a deploy, they just get auto run, and that gives us a report on what's working and what's not, based on some previous expectations that we've set. So that is kind of that one. We then just booked out some time. We told them it would be the week commencing the 23rd. We'll need to actually take the site down for about half an hour while we run the upgrade. It's always recommended to do this one with the site in maintenance mode, so you're not dealing with any database corruption or anything like that. You're clean and relaxed to just handle the deployment, just liaising with stakeholders. There were some famous news stories that were coming that would have required the website to be accessible. So obviously we needed to book time so we didn't collide with that. And as you can see, we actually managed to deploy successfully on the 24th of October at 7:30 in the morning. So again, with Rosie, who I think is on this call as well, we had a very early morning getting coffee and just going through the update process, which for us was fairly smooth, mostly because we use an automated script to handle our deployments. So once we'd gone through all the testing, the actual final deployment itself, slightly anticlimactic really. Once you hit code switch, the rest of the process just runs completely automatically. We were down, I think, for a total of 15 minutes to let the update process run and give us time to just test everything. And then we were back up and running. Yeah, and that's kind of the big notes from me. I mean, other things, Seek Editor 5 was a big change for our content editors in terms of the new interface and things. So we actually rolled out a new role a couple of weeks beforehand to give them time just to get used to what the new editor would look like and get some feedback. One issue we came across, which we actually did in the post Drupal 10 update, was to install a paste from Word filter, because Seek Editor 5 was just bringing in lots of strange formatting. So that was important, just to, again, liaise with the stakeholders and other people using the website to get to know what their kind of needs are and make sure that everything's happy with that one. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else, Finn, you want me to really cover.
That's great, Andy. Thank you so much. I think let's just move on and summarize and then see if there are any questions. I haven't seen any in the chat, but I'm not sure. My chat keeps on popping up and disappearing again. If there are any in the chat that I haven't seen, let me know. But no, thank you, Andy. That's like super cool to see various tips and issues that you've had to deal with. How do I share the screen? Oh, here we go. Desktop one. So yeah, thank you very much, Andy. So just briefly to sort of like summarize, I guess, and sort of takeaways from that briefly noted down before the call. Let's look ahead to the next version. I think it's always important to not let it sneak up on you. So I'm planning to start doing that in the LocalGov Drupal world straight away. Let's look ahead to 11. Try and keep core content up to date as possible. Choose your content wisely, like that MPDF issue there. Like if you're choosing a library or a module to extend your site, then check just about the longevity of it, and the maintenance, I guess, is important to avoid potential technical debt. Testing regularly, obviously it's important, but I think it's just worth restating always. And I like that you mentioned, Andy, keeping your stakeholders aware of the updates and releases, and that whole kind of like engagement with stakeholders, making them aware that there's going to be downtime for deploy. But hopefully through testing and planning and rehearsing the deployment, which is a really good point, Andy, thank you, then you keep the downtime to a minimum and everybody's happy. But happy to hear other people's suggestions or takeaways or key points for happy upgrades as well. In the meantime, keep in touch. If you don't already know, there's lou.my, which is, I guess, how you're here, /LocalGov Drupal, where you can find links to the Merge Mondays every Monday at 2 p.m, tech drop-ins every Thursday afternoons. And yeah, let's help get the next version of LocalGov Drupal updated and ready, even sooner next time. Maybe starting a testing working group to help that go through. So are there anybody out there? Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Is there anyone out there with questions? And I thought I might launch one more poll, which is whether you have Drupal updates left to do or not. So I don't know if that's going to work. Because I wonder if we're sort of, preaching to the like, no, we've all done our updates, but there's still people that've got some updates to do. It looks like there are still some people who've got some updates to do. Yeah, because obviously it's been a shorter period of time since Drupal 9 to Drupal 10 release than maybe we'd have hoped.
Ross, have you got a question? You've got your hand raised, Scott.
Oh yeah, no, Scott. Sorry, I thought you said someone else's name. Never mind. No, just a quick question. On the other side of things, once you've, because this is all the very technical stuff, and that's great. I'm learning lots. Thank you very much. Because I'm sure at some point I will be involved. Although I'm technical, I don't do the upgrades. I'm sure at some point I will be doing the upgrades. So this has been very helpful. Thank you. On the other side of things, only because that's what we're doing now at the moment. So we have marked. We've still got upgrades to do. It's because we're waiting for our supplier to do the upgrades and hand it over to us for us to do the testing. That has anyone found any that has done the upgrade? Any content or anything else has changed on the front end, or is it all just purely a technical upgrade and a lot of that stuff we don't have to worry about? Like I'm talking from like a user's perspective, the local populace, you know.
It's a very good question. I think I haven't seen any major changes that, you know, anything that,
other than
that's
obviously
broken
the geo stuff,
broken things on the front. Well, yeah, I mean, missing data loss is a big issue. That, yeah, if we didn't spot those things, then that would be an issue. I think the theme, so the theme led, I think, did it change Twig version? Is there anyone?
You would have
Andy,
changed from Twig 2 to Twig 3. So
yeah,
there are some things, Drupal Rector will pick them up in your custom theme. If you're using the computed twig in web form, there is some adjustment that you have to do. Although I think it was just ticking a box to say use the spaceless filter rather than writing the spaceless tag. So there's a couple of like deprecations that are, there's things like you can't use spaceless. It's spaceless is now a filter, and there's using an if condition as part of a for statement. They have to now be separate statements. Those are the
and you mentioned
two.
the jQuery once thing as well, which I guess may have an impact on front-end UX.
Yes, so we had this in a couple of our custom JavaScript. The jQuery once library is no longer shipped by default. Drupal have replaced this with their own once library. So you just need to change that to your dependency, and you have to slightly adjust the JavaScript. There's an example of this on, I'm just going to quickly share the screen again. There is an example of this on LocalGov Forms, where as part of the compatibility, we updated it. So as you can see in the old format, it's this dollar the jQuery thing dot once. And for the new version of once, it's just dollar once and then the class handler. So it's a very small change you just have to do. You can do that on the Drupal 9 side. So the Drupal once library is available on Drupal 9, but jQuery once is not part of Drupal 10. Other things that I think, as I mentioned, the CK Editor 5, there was a spot from the pasting from Word, and pasting from Hemingway was an interesting one because a lot of our content designers, they use Hemingway a lot, and CK Editor 5 wasn't filtering as much that it used to filter out when you paste. We found a module called CK Editor 5 Paste Filter that's just had an RC1 release. That's been pretty good at, it lets you fully customize, but the default set is pretty good from pasting from Word.
So what was that again? What was that?
CK Editor 5 Paste Filter. I'll post messages on the Slack. I'll need to like look all the modules up, but if you look for something like CK Editor 5 Paste Filter, you should be able to find it. And there's another odd issue, though I think the latest Drupal 10 does actually solve this, which is the assets have to be loaded with the theme key as part of the query string. So we did notice a lot coming into our error logs of PHP errors, and it was just people who'd cached an old version of the theme. So I'd probably just move your assets to a sort of a lower cache or clear your varnish cache if you're using varnish, just so they request the assets to using the proper URL format. Although that bug has now been fixed in 10.1.6, so it doesn't clog your error logs up anymore. Yeah, because it was quite a you looked at that and go PHP error, and you were in slight panic, and then you realised what it was.
Yeah.
That's that one. There's also another thing, but again, I think it's a minor technical one, which is just the password hashing has changed, and so the upgrade automatically enables a module to deal with the compatibility. That's potentially a future thing for Drupal 11, where your older users will need to either log in again or request a password, but we've not actually encountered any incidents from that, so it's just something to note.
So
cool. Thank you very much.
Interrupt, but it sounds like we're coming to the end of it. We are pretty much out of time. In fact, we're over time. So I think we should wrap up. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you, Andy, for notes from the front line. Tim, have you got a couple of wrap-up things to say?
I have. So thanks very much to Finn and Andy for a really comprehensive session. It was a bit of a whirlwind, wasn't it? It was absolutely brilliant. And so that will go on to our YouTube channel at some point. So we'll make sure we post that out when it is, when it's live. Thanks to everyone for coming. We hope you found it useful. And we really hope you enjoy this and other sessions this week for LocalGov Drupal Week. Please give us your feedback by responding to the email you'll receive after this session. I need to say thanks again to our sponsor, Home Connections. And also, of course, there's lots going on this week, so please do register for future events. But that's it from us. Hopefully we'll see you again later in the week. Thanks again for coming. Thanks again to Finn and Andy, and we'll see you soon. Thanks very much.